Hi, I'm Mina Malik Hussain, and this is The Coffee Table. And as always, we have a wonderful show lined up for you today. And it's quite exciting because we're talking about a subject that we haven't really discussed in great length or in great depth before. Well, just once, really. So I'm really happy to be coming back to talking about dance on The Coffee Table. And we're going to be looking at contemporary dance, Western dance, classical, Eastern dancing, Bharatnatyam, Khattak. It's great. It's got a wonderful lineup today. It's so exciting. And I'm really, really happy to be welcoming on the show today Khanzada Asfandyar Khattak. He is the president of the Indus Cultural Caravan. He is a classical and fusion dance artist, a choreographer, teacher, and researcher. In 2007, he became legendary dance instructor and dancer Indu Mitha's student. He's performed all over Pakistan, Afghanistan, and in Malaysia. And he has the distinction of being the first Pashtun to learn Khattak and Bharatnatyam, which is magnificent. And I can't wait to talk to him more about this. We are also joined by Gillian Rhodes, who is a performing artist and storyteller who studied dance at Columbia University in New York, and is these days based in Lahore and teaching dance through a whole bunch of very lucky children. And we are also joined by Tanzila Khan, a disability rights activist who performed with Gillian in the wonderful performance More Than My Gender. And I'm so excited to be able to be talking to Tanzila all about that in just a moment. Welcome to the show, all three of you. So many lovely things happening today. So Asfandyar, let's sort of begin at the beginning and tell me, how did you find dance? Or maybe how did dance find you?
So basically, if I recall, the first thing that I remember from my life is dance. Because even before I started talking, because dance is the first thing which one does. Dance is basically movement, and movement comes first, and then the sound, and then the voice, and then the words. Wow. So for me, life started with dance and movement. And from the very childhood, I was interested in dance. I used to dance on Pashto tracks. In those days, there used to be audio cassettes.
Yes.
I used to listen to those, and I used to dance on those. And later on, I developed interest in Indian classical dance by watching Bollywood songs and Bollywood movies. So, I started learning it from VCR tapes, cassettes. And because, this was the Islamabad of 1980s, and there were no opportunities to learn dance, and especially not Indian classical dance. And then in 2001, there was this ad in the newspaper, the news, that, classical dance for women and children. So I called them up from my PTCL landline and told them that, neither am I a child anymore and neither am I a woman. So why is this discrimination? Why can't I learn dance? So they were very fascinated that how come a Pathan, a Khattak, and he's interested in Indian classical dance. So then, I went to them and I was made to stand at the end of the class because it was all females and housewives and, other girls. So they wanted to, not be exposed. Like, for example, I used to stand at the back of the class mostly. So, I started learning Khattak. And this was,
it was like dance winner.
Yeah. So Saima Khushnud, whose father used to teach at Lollywood, and he taught the film actress Reema.
Wow.
And so this was back in 2001. And, so I sort of learned basic Khattak, and that was the time while I was doing my A-levels. So, it was so exciting because one is young and one is enthusiastic.
Yes.
And then in 2007, I was, auditioned for a stage play in which they played some Western music. And I told them that, I'm a very basic kind of, indigenous guy. So just play some, basic track for me. They said, this is an audition, not a dance party. So you have to, dance on this.
Wow. Wow, to Jackson.
So, I did whatever Khattak that I had learned on that, Western song.
Wow,
and, there was this
that's a quick thinking. That's thinking on your feet.
Yeah. So there was a girl in the audience, and she said, "Oh, you did it amazing, and I could not have done it like this." And she told me that she has been learning, Indian classical dance. I forgot about everything, and I said, okay, just tell me the name of your guru and dance teacher. And she said, this is Indu Mithaji.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to stop you there because I want to leave it on a cliffhanger, because this is a really delicious part of this story. Cliffhanger. Goodness, I laugh at my own jokes on this show a lot. Basically, I'm a big uncle. But anyway, hi Gillian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, this is such a delight, and it's also so lovely to have two practitioners from very different styles of dance and different sort of practices of dance. What's the word for a dance practice? Is it a practice? What do we call that?
I think it's an art, it's a practice. I guess it's all of that.
Yeah, I was wondering what the appropriate sort of adjective is. So Gillian, tell me about your story.
I mean, I guess I would say,
yeah.
I would say like dance professional. At least the two of us, dance professional.
No, quite right. And so tell me about your journey with dance, because I feel like in South Asia, it's a very different approach. And, this is something that Asfandyar and I will be talking a little bit more as well. But what was your journey to dance? Like, how did you find yourself coming to dance and wanting to learn it professionally and now being a teacher of it as well?
Well, I'm still a professional. Actually,
yes.
I teach on the side when I have to, but that's not my main focus. Like I actually my focus is still on the performance and the creation and the practice of dance itself. I do teach, but I try not to keep the focus too much on that. But basically, I was so young that I don't remember it. Basically, the story is in hearsay, what I hear from my family, because basically I was learning figure skating when I was 4, never mind why or how. But
right.
My parents, my dad basically would bring home these cassettes, I guess, VHS of the New York City Ballet and the most famous Balanchine ballet dancers like Darcy Bustle and those. And they say that at some point I just, pointed at the screen and was just like, I'm going to do that. And so they basically, they put me in ballet classes because, in the West, there's a ballet studio every corner pretty much.
There is,
so,
yeah. And there's a great sort of, there is a great sort of practice and tradition of little girls going to learn ballet. Everybody wants to be a ballerina at that age.
At that age, yes. But I just loved it, and I kept going, and I kept practicing, and when we moved to another state, I really wanted to continue, and so I just wanted to keep actually. But then, at a certain point, when I was 11. Yeah. I was training so hard. I was basically in the studio 6 days a week, 5 hours a day.
Wow. And since you were very little.
I was so, yes, but I was so tired of it, that I basically said, listen, I'm done. It's not fun. I don't want to do it anymore. I quit. Yeah. And my parents, fortunately, were fine with that. So they said, okay, fine, Gillian, you can quit. Yeah. And of course, so I did, and I got interested in gymnastics and circus and the other things that one does. But basically, I was 15 and I was,
circus. Right? You have to stop everything. Tell me about the circus, because not everybody does that.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically, I grew up in Colorado, and there's a town not so far away called Boulder, Colorado, yes. And they had a big circus community, and
wow.
I don't know, don't ask me. I started learning, the aerial silks, basically, the tissues that are hanging from the ceiling, and you climb and wrap and do all these falls and stuff. And
wow,
yeah, and I learned to ride a unicycle. I did circus camp for a couple of years. I taught at a circus camp. I learned to basically juggle. And I was training really hard for a while, but. Yeah. At a certain point, basically, I just, I missed dance. I missed proper, pure dance, having my feet on the floor. Yeah. And so basically I just decided, hey, listen, I'm gonna study this in university. And so you know, I went from basically casually taking ballet lessons again, you know, in high school to majoring in it in university, and never really looked back since then.
That's so full. And what really stands out to me is how there were so many avenues available for you to explore. So even because you had a sort of a certain grounding in dance and a certain training in a certain discipline, you were able to take that discipline into other kinds of movement-related practices, and then also be able to kind of cycle back to dance when you felt like it was time to come back to it. And that's something I want to talk to you a little bit more about in just a second. But first things first, hi Tanzila, can you hear me?
Thank you so much. I think it's high time now I make a physical appearance very soon.
I look forward to it.
Coffee table is definitely part of my media appearances.
And we're very happy as well to have that. I'm patting my own self on the back. And yes, very good. So Tanzila, you are somebody who's so vibrant and so involved in so many wonderful projects, and you are a writer, you run girly things where you're sort of, you know, working for menstrual health projects. And now you also collaborated with Gillian and the artist Sara Mumtaz on this wonderful project called More Than My Gender. So I want you to tell me a little bit about what was the performance about, and what was the sort of process? How were you guys sort of creating this wonderful synergy where you sort of, you know, different diverse talents coming together to create this wonderful performance?
Absolutely, Mina. It has been a wonderful experience. Firstly, I would like to share one thing that I think as activists, we all have one language, we all have one theory, we all have one cause, and that is inclusion, harmony, bringing the community together. And we can have multiple mediums to project that and try to make that happen in the community. So for me, dance was a very latest and new form of medium. And luckily, I found colleagues like Gillian and Sara Mumtaz that helped us put this together. And this particular performance was about gender, but it also spoke about disability, but not just disability of the body. It spoke about disabling attitudes, so much so that when Gillian performed with us, there was so much that she shared, and I felt that, you know what, I think we both are in the same shoes in different ways.
No.
That makes us look at disability in a very broader way, and that's really interesting, because we tend to look at disability as somebody who's missing a limb or something, but that's not true. So it kind of broadens your own horizon, and gender becomes like a big conversation, and how much our attitudes are disabling, keeping gender in mind. And everybody has a gender. We all experience these attitudes, and I think that's the disability part, the attitudes.
Yes, Gillian. Talk to me.
I would just wanted to add to what Tanzila was saying, basically. So basically, you know, Tanzila sort of pitched the project, the idea, and then basically it was in collaboration with the British Council, who you know, helped us with the funding and stuff. But basically, you know, it was called More Than My Gender because it was all about the idea that when you talk about a man, you talk about, you know, he's like this, he's like that, you know, blah blah blah. But when you talk about a woman, it's always in relation to the fact that she's a woman. You know, it's very hard. You don't hear people describe women really unless, you know, it's in relation to the fact that she's a woman.
Yes, no, absolutely.
And and so this project was really kind of investigating, you know, there was me, Sara, and Tanzila, and you know, yes, we're women, but, you know, we're these whole list of complicated, confused, you know, strong, independent beings, you know. And so it was really more about that celebration of, it's not about, you know, celebrating the womanhood per se. It's celebrating us being human and you know, having all of these complexities and stories.
No, I think that is so interesting and so valuable to consider how the universalization of the male experience is something that happens in everything really, in literature and the arts and culture, and the way that language is constructed. And I think that we're going to take a very quick break at this juncture, as much as I hate to do it, but we will be back in a jiffy to talk more about More Than My Gender and dance and performance. Stay with us. welcome back to the coffee table. I promise not to do any more strange jazz hands as we talk to dance professionals Khanzada, Asfandyar, Khattak, and Gillian Rhodes, and disability rights activist, and altogether wonderful, cool girl, Tanzila Khan. So before the break, we were talking about the More Than My Gender project, and Gillian, we were talking about how it wasn't just a dance performance or just a spoken word performance, but it was also an investigation into personhood and how everybody deserves to be seen as individuals. And so then how did you guys devise the way the performance then panned out, keeping in mind everybody's strengths?
Yeah, so basically, it was an interesting creation process, especially because I had original music created for it by Natasha Mareja. Yeah, and so basically, but she was creating at the same time. So a lot of the stuff that we did, the movement was actually without the music. So, for this, it was a lot of just like figuring things out, really, like when we were doing the spoken word section, we just sat and I let Sarah and Tanzila just tell me their stories, and I would give them questions, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And then I kind of, combined those things and made this script that we then recorded and put on the music. Yeah. And then, a lot of it, basically I see as a choreographer, it's my work to take the dancer's abilities that I have and create something which is exciting and beautiful. Basically I didn't want the piece to be about the fact that the dancers, two of the dancers were disabled. I didn't want it to be, it wasn't, obvious. It would be obvious, you can't not notice that when you're watching it, but I wanted the dance itself to be not about that. The dance would be about the movement and the interaction of us. And so, it was a lot of just experimenting. I think, Tanzila will tell you there was one time in rehearsal where we were just playing around, and I was just like, listen, Tanzila, can I climb around on your wheelchair? And so we spent about, 10 minutes of me just climbing around on her wheelchair, figuring out, where can I go and where can I stand and what's stable and all this kind of stuff. So and that eventually ended up as a duet in the final piece.
But that is so wonderful. And that's exact kind of conversation that I feel dancers have on stage with each other. And Tanzila, how did it feel? Because, you are a writer and that's a different kind of performance. But then dance is a totally different kind of form of expression. So what was the experience like for you?
It was absolutely a fantastic experience because I was getting my space to express my craft, my story in a very artistic way with expressions that I wanted the world to understand and see and also relate to. So as Gillian is explaining that she was trying to experiment with my wheelchair, it wasn't just like a stunt. Every act represented a storyline, something that we had felt in our journey. And once you get to see the performance in Chala, everything that you hear or see is something that we either of the three of us, we've felt, we've experienced, and everything we shared are actually our real stories. So I think for me, that part was very special, and for me to present that in a movement way, especially being a woman with a disability, but putting that aside and making movement my ability, I think that was a game changer for myself. And I hope that I paved the way for more women with disabilities to come forward as artists and pick this as a career. There are a lot of producers to look up to people with disabilities as performers as well, and to make them tell their own story rather than some hi-fi producer or writer comes and starts narrating a story about disability. It's time we tell our own stories, and I think More Than My Gender was definitely one big example for that.
No, and I think the point that you're making about how people with disabilities are able to tell their own stories, but a lot of times it's about an opportunity to do that. And I think that even the visual of Gillian being able to use her wheelchair in this performance, like to me, sounds like such a beautiful way to sort of incorporate one aspect about somebody in a really natural and effortless way, that this is just as much a part of you as, your hands or your eyes or anything really, because it's not about just one thing that people should or could or can fixate on. But and to me that feels like this is, I think, art and artistic storytelling at its best, to be able to take everything into its, well, embrace, to put it poetically. So Gillian, tell me, you describe yourself as a storyteller as well. So when we are looking at dance, and we're looking at contemporary dance, for example, well, I don't know, I'm a layperson, so I suppose any dance really, but I think particularly when we look at contemporary dance, I think a lot of people feel really mystified by it. To me, it's kind of like the abstract painting of the dancing world, where people sort of see it and they're like, I like it, but I don't understand it. So how does that work?
I mean, to be very honest, I'm mystified about most of the contemporary dance that I see as well, and I'm trained in it. So, I mean, it's true. It is very abstract a lot of times, and that's just the form. That's, there's a lot of traditions and techniques within contemporary dance which are really just about the architecture of the movement. It's just about the shapes and the, there's a lot of, like with abstract or postmodern art, you kind of have to know the game in order to really appreciate what's going on.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm mostly inspired by the choreographer Pina Bausch. Maybe you've heard of her. But she kind of pioneered this form called dance theater in the 70s and 80s. And she really, basically the idea of the dance theater was very much that, she was using the movement, but it was very raw and emotional because it was not necessarily full stories from beginning to end, but it was very much about the expression, and that's something that you could, as an audience member, you just get instinctively, and there's another, like the best ballet performer, potentially best, best ballet performer in the world, Baryshnikov.
Yes.
I've watched his, I watch his, the videos of him dancing, and he's one of the few people that can just infuse every movement he does with some sort of intention or. So the thing about dance is that what I try to do is that, okay, yes, the audience might not understand every single detail about what I'm trying to express, but there is some universality of it that they're going to get instinctively. It's like basically, like on the Zoom, I can show you something where basically I don't have to go anywhere, I don't have to do anything, but if I do this, know what it means necessarily, but you know something, right? There's something that you're just like, okay, there's something going on here, right? And so basically that's what the work that I try to do is that, like, something in it just speaks somehow, it says something, and that's why I call myself a storyteller.
I think that is a beautiful way to put it, because even in the gesture that you did, for me, it immediately there was an immediate response in me to kind of be like, there's an urgency there, there's a distance, there's longing. And I think that's why of so many dance forms, art forms, I feel like dance is one of the most kind of, and you and Asfandyar have talked about how, as children you were drawn to dance. And I think that all of us as humans are naturally and instinctively drawn to music and to dance, in the sense of a dance is is almost an instinctive response of the body to the world around us. And then sort of being trained in it means that we're sort of refining that language and ability to communicate what we are feeling. And I think that what you said about intentionality is really beautiful and really complex also, because, when we look at a lot of, meditation, or even a lot of East Asian thought about, and philosophy, a lot of it is about being an intentional person in the world, and that everything that we do should have meaning. And for me, that dance then you've just infused it with another layer of meaningfulness, and I'm feeling really thrilled about thinking about it that way. So while I natter on about this, we're going to take a very quick break. Tanzila Khan, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your experience with More Than My Gender, a performance that I encourage all of you to watch. It is beautiful and completely unique. There's nothing like it, and it is just really a treat. visually and orally. We're going to be continuing our conversation with Gillian and Asfandyar, but right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the coffee table. We're having a fascinating conversation about dance and the arts and inhabiting your body with dance professionals Gillian Rhodes and Asfandyar Khattak. So now, Asfandyar, returning to our cliffhanger, which I have left everybody dangling over far too long. So tell me, what was it like to learn Bharatnatyam from the legendary Indu Mithaji?
It was a life-changing experience for me.
Wow.
Because, in 2G, of course, at the age of 91 now, and, a presidential Pride of Performance Award winner. And, because, she is a person who literally transformed my life. It wasn't only dance which I learned from her, it was a way of life which I learned from her. And, since 2007, initially, she taught me Khattak, which is North Indian classical dance, which is more prevalent in our area, including Pakistan.
Yes.
And later on, I started learning Kathakali and then finally South Indian classical dance, which is Bharatnatyam, which is from the Tamil Nadu, South India. So, by learning these different genres of classical dance from her, it really gave me many, many perspectives towards life and towards dance and towards movement in itself. Because, there's a history of thousands of years which is associated to these dances.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Being Afghan, being Pathan, coming from a KP, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area, and then getting exposure of these very unique Indian classical dances, it was a very beautiful experience for me. And then what I did was that after learning initial Khattak and South Indian classical dance from her, I thought, why not make my own version and present it in my own style and present it in a style which is more palatable for our audience of Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that unfortunately these days there are very few people in Pakistan who actually appreciate classical dance and who are actually lovers of Indian classical music.
Yes.
So in order to cater to the masses and to the audience in general, I use Pashto and Afghan folk music.
Yes.
And then I performed Khattak on it. So I made a fusion of Khattak.
Well, that's
and
wonderful.
then, this is...
And then I'm sure you also do that. You also brought to that sort of dance conversation your own experience with tribal dances, with Lugadi and Nafshari, and I know that you perform. That must have been an interesting kind of combination of those two different styles of dance also. And both of them are completely indigenous to this part of the world as well.
Exactly. Another thing is that, when we talk about dance, we go into originality. And originality is, the best way of concealing the facts.
Yeah.
So, if you don't conceal the facts, everything has been evolving since thousands of years,
Yeah.
But since 1100 years, since more than 1,000 years, there has been the Muslim influence on Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
So when that, scenario came into being, when the Muslim conquerors, the Afghans, the Turks, the Mongols, when they came with their dancers and with their genre of music and style. And then India, Delhi and Bengal and these areas were the melting points. Like, for example, today, New York or California is. How culture is evolving over there, internationally. So, in those days, 1,000 years back or 500 years back, India was a melting pot. So, here the dances of the West, the Central Asia and the Pashtuns and the Indian classical dances, those were amalgamated, and Khattak was born, in the way we see it. Because, Khattak started, like all the Indian classical dances, started as folk dances. Because, dances always start as folk dances and later on they become classical. So, this classical
what's the difference?
Has,
So what's the difference between a dance and a classical dance? Is it a sort of, when it becomes a kind of formal teaching practice, is that how it sort of folk becomes classical? Or is it just an evolutionary thing? Like, I'm curious.
It is evolutionary because the thing is that everything starts as folk, of course, because it's a people's way of movement, it's the people's way of expression, and once that expression is defined and it's catered to a particular audience, then it becomes classical. Classical is not for the masses. Classical is not for everybody. Classical is just for maybe a particular elite or for a particular taste. And so classical dances have evolved over centuries and over thousands of years. And Khattak is the only classical dance which is from the northern part of India, which includes Pakistan. And Bharatnatyam is completely from the south. So it's a southernmost classical dance. And these dances also started as folk dances, and later on they became devotional dances, temple dances, and finally we see them as contemporary versions. We see their contemporary versions of it.
No, that's a very interesting and important thing that a folk dance became devotional and then became classical. And I think it's also a really interesting point that Asfandyar has raised about how classical dance is not necessarily for everybody, and it's not created for everybody. So Gillian, how does one become a good audience then for a classical performance? Is there a way that we can sort of, educate ourselves in being able to appreciate that particular kind of performance?
I think it's a good question.
I put you into a quandary.
I think really honestly, the best thing that you can do is to be exposed to many different kinds of performances, and to also try and maybe just learn about it a little bit, a little bit about the form, where it comes from, where, like, for example, if you just watch ballet, you're just like, what is going on, right? But if you know that it originated in like the French courts, and the reason they turned their feet out is because the nobles were sitting on the side and they didn't want to close their bodies to it, and they could, and the king was sitting in front of them, so they couldn't turn their back on the king. So everything is like facing front. So then you start to understand a little bit like how the technique was formed, and you start to learn a little bit about, where it comes from, how it evolved, and then you it just makes more sense, like maybe it's not your thing, that's fine. Right. Like I honestly really can't watch ballets. I get bored, but I
and
appreciate
somebody who's
it.
Learned how to do it.
No, but like ballet for me is like, I love the technique of it as a training, as a discipline, because when ballet, basically it's just such good training for your body. But to watch as a profession, like I don't perform ballet. I'm not a professional ballerina. Like that's on a completely other level.
But
so
Swan
I
Lake
train
is
in
not
it.
your
Great,
go-to when you're sort of wanting to watch a performance. It's not your first choice, which is also interesting and something to think about, that not all forms of dance are sort of universally appreciated. And as a person who wants to know more about dance, it sounds like a good idea to kind of watch lots of different kinds of things and then see what you respond to. So kind of follow your nose. Because I also feel like a lot of times with the arts, and because I'm a writer, a lot of people say this about poetry as well, that they find it daunting. Just the idea of it sounds daunting. But there's something for everybody. And I think that the thing about, like, you don't like to watch ballet, but that's fine. Like, as a professional, if you don't like watching ballet, that's cool, It really comes down to a matter of personal taste as well.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I really like that. But Asfandyar, sort of coming back to dance and learning dance, like I'm also curious that, Gillian comes from a background where she was sort of formally trained and she was able to sort of do dance as a subject in college. But the way that we learn the art, so I'm thinking of music and I'm thinking of dance. And, at one point, even art and painting was something that you sort of just learned from your ustad. But do you feel like do suffer from a lack of formal training in that particular formal sense, or do you feel like this mode of communication is fine and it suits us to sort of learn in that kind of very physical, give and take, highly interactive way from your ustad? I think this is a very roundabout way of saying that, do we need to institutionalize the teaching of dance more?
Of course, we need to institutionalize dance because it has never been patronized by the government of Pakistan till date.
Okay.
So if the government doesn't patronize dance, how can because when we talk about Indian subcontinent, because we have to go back to the history. All these dances were patronized by the kings, by the Mughal kings, by the Afghan kings, and these dances were done in the courts. Now, why is Khattak famous? Because Khattak was patronized by the Mughal emperors, and they were the strongest in the history of India. And then later, when their decline, came, the Mughal decline, the dance was patronized, Khattak dance was patronized by the Nawabs of Lucknow, by the Nawabs of Jaipur, So, we have those patrons. Now, the moment those patrons, the patrons are not there, the government should have taken the responsibility of patronizing art, but the government did not. So, now it is in the hands of common people or in the hands of NGOs or in the hands of TV channels that if they sort of patronize it, dance will stay. Because, the thing is that, people have money and you can't say that people don't have money, but they don't want to spend it on dance. They don't want to spend it on a dance lesson. They don't want to give it to a dance teacher. They want to see every performance for free. In the weddings, you would have, a great expenditure on costumes, on clothes, on jewelry, on food, everything. But when it comes to inviting performers, they would say, oh, we don't have money, so if the dancers could come for free, we'll feed them, there's nice dinner and everything. And this is the reality. And, where does this pressure comes from? This pressure comes from the elite, from the people who have money. They don't want to spend money on dance because they think that, they can get it for free. So now the thing is that, there should be proper institutions. For example, I was lucky enough that, I started learning dance from Madam Indus Special, but not everybody is fortunate enough. Not everyone lives in Islamabad. Now, not everybody has the affordability of time and money to because, the thing is that, if we had a dance school and if there had been a proper career in dance in Pakistan, I might have started learning dance from the very beginning instead of, going for MBA for O-levels and A-levels and, sort of wasting my time in things in which I was not really interested.
Quite right. And there's so many programs in the US, for example, where they are performing art schools. And like you said, like children who have an aptitude can just start learning it from an early age, where you can be learning dance and music and singing and theater. You can go to a school that's specialized in doing that. But do you feel like we are still, sort of struggling with the idea? And I think that what you said about careers is very important, because a lot of parents, there aren't that many lucrative careers in the arts in this, part of the world, which is why parents probably don't want the children to spend that much time learning the arts. But at the same time, it's so strange and such a dichotomy, because these arts have been part of this land for thousands of years. And it's really I feel like it's very much part of us. And it's detrimental for us to ignore that part of ourselves. Even if you do an MBA, having some kind of education in the arts just makes you a better person and a more present person and a more intentional person. I'm really falling down a philosophical rabbit hole here.
Now, let me tell you one thing, that, the thing is that, urbanized, middle class, people who were actually from the rural areas.
Yeah.
All the folk is in the rural areas. Now, when people started migrating to the cities, in the pursuit of earning money and in pursuit of getting education, they sort of, left dance and they sort of left their folk art.
Yes, and this idea that the folk dance was something, a lack of better word, paindu. that you don't really think about your atan or your luddi as something that is sophisticated. So then you just kind of don't do it.
Yes, and also you think that it's something unnecessary. You can't earn out of it, and better focus on your education or on your career.
Yeah.
So this urbanization has also really damaged the folk artists and the folk dance in itself.
Gillian wants to pop in here for a quick comment. We'll come back to Asfandyar in just 1 second. Yes, Gillian?
No, I just wanted to make a small point that, certainly in this part of the world, there is a lot of challenges in dances, such a small, teeny tiny industry. But, there are very few places in the world, even in the West, where dance is, especially classical, ballet, contemporary, whatever, it's not mainstream, and it's never going to be, hip hop and, fancy, acrobatic sort of thing, maybe, but dance and the amount of dance professionals are never going to be, a lot. So I think that's just something to know. It's not just this region, that everywhere there's when I was studying dance at Columbia, I would tell people, I'm majoring in dance, and they'd be like, are your parents okay with that? So I still, I also
it's good to know. It's good to know that the anxieties are at the same university. No, but that's actually a really interesting and valuable point to keep in mind there. But yes, Asfandyar, you were telling me about what the efforts that you are now sort of doing for dance.
Well, my own organization also tried to shape by the name of Indus Cultural Caravan. And through this, I am not only teaching dance in Islamabad, and I'm encouraging others, because I don't think that there's a particular age to learn dance. I mean, any age is the right age. The moment you think that you want to learn dance, that's the right age. I mean, ideally, it should be right from the very beginning. But, not everybody is fortunate enough. And, considering the recent past of Pakistan, all the decades of 80s and 90s, how we suffered, particularly in terms of art and dance. Any small gesture or any small movement, a step ahead, makes a difference. So, I am trying to, promote human rights and, women's rights and children's rights and any topic which is relevant. For example, I asked for, awareness of Corona last year. And it's still relevant, and it was on a Pashto song by one of our folk artists, Harun Bata, who's based in Germany. And then, I added the Pashto English subtitles to it because, Pashto audience is limited to Afghanistan and Pakistan and to the Pashtun diaspora. But when you add the English subtitles, then it becomes universal. Dance is something in which you have a maximum exposure to all sorts of audiences.
So it's a sort of double-edged. So the more dance that we are able to see, and the more sort of dance vocabulary that we build, the better we'll be able to understand performances and be able to appreciate them for what they're trying to tell us. And really, I think I sort of keep talking about this on the show a lot, about how the arts are ultimately the thing that we all instinctively go to. And I think that with this past year with the pandemic and things as well, I think that the importance of the arts has hit us even harder, that the importance of the story and the importance of connecting with each other across language and across these sort of various barriers are even more important and urgent, more than ever. Tripping over my tongue in my enthusiasm. Thank you so much, Gillian and Asfandyar, for being with me today. Thank you, Tanzila, from previously as well. This was such a fascinating and wonderful conversation. It's really inspiring me to start Khattak. It was always a lifelong dream of mine, and I think I should do something about it now. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time on the coffee table. Bye.